But first off, let's just lead this off with a quote from Wilson that everyone should know. And that is that the Declaration of Independence did not mention the questions of our day. It is of no consequence to us. Now, progressives tend to think what's in the past, what's old, is not that great, and that we should be evolving and are evolving, and what's coming next will be even better. They like to discard ideas from the past, and that quote should absolutely bring that home to you. The Declaration...
I actually, in a weird way, respect Woodrow Wilson. I think that's a terrible opinion. But I respect him that he's willing to say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. For being the... Yeah. I respect Wilson for being the first president to dislike the founding of the country.
I mean, he wasn't hiding it.
It does take some guts to do that. So now Wilson would later on say, he would go back and he would say, well, that first part, that's pretty, you got to take that out. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But if you look at the Declaration, it talks about in the course of human events. Okay, human events are always unfolding. Whenever a government becomes despotic, governments are always becoming despotic. The Declaration absolutely, it exists as something sort of aside and above history, something observing history and saying, look, these are problems that we need to solve. So let's just share a few quick things about Woodrow Wilson. Before he was president, when he was first starting out, he was hired as a professor at Bryn Mawr. According to Ronald Pistrito, who was writing for the Heritage Foundation, Wilson quickly became dissatisfied at Bryn Mawr. His salary was insufficient, and he regarded his position as less than prestigious because all of his students were women. So he wanted out of that.
Yeah.
He was always, from a young age, he was fixated on government, the idea of constitutions, the idea of governing. He did not like the American separation of powers, which is what has actually protected the American system for hundreds of years. There's a reason that we have gridlock in D.C. There's supposed to be gridlock. That was the idea. It keeps things from getting done. And as long as Congress isn't doing something to you, they can't take your rights away from you. Wilson, however, should go down in infamy as the president who signed the national income tax law in 1913. Until then, an income tax was, in fact, it was unconstitutional. It was unheard of that the government would take from you because you work. The government could actually do that. That was unheard of. Wilson changed that. Wilson also brought back to life the Federal Reserve, allowing the elites to monkey with the economy and essentially tax us. Not only did he get the income tax, he established a system whereby inflation could be used to secretly tax us.
Yeah.
Yeah, while we're talking about Joe Biden comparisons, inflation was a huge issue of Wilson's presidency.
Yes.
So.
Sure took advantage of that. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I could just print off money to pay for all this BS. That sounds great.
That's amazing. So let's see here. Another delightful little tidbit about Wilson. The eugenics movement was all the rage at that time. And if you don't know, the eugenics movement was the idea that you weed out undesirables from the gene pool. And of course, who was undesirable in that time? Well, it wasn't white folks. White folks were eminently desirable. Men, very desirable at that time.
Yeah.
So I'm quoting here from Paul Ray. He was writing in, I think this was in The Atlantic, if I remember correctly. With the dictates of social Darwinism and the eugenics movement in mind, in 1907, Wilson campaigned in Indiana for compulsory sterilization of criminals and the mentally retarded. And in 1911, while governor of New Jersey, he proudly signed into law just such a bill. Now, consider that overlaid with the criminal justice system that we see today and the statistics that were out there. Wilson would have been in favor of sterilizing untold numbers of black men.
Yeah. Oh,
that's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that that's very different from the current Democratic Party, which is that criminals should just be walking on the street free and you shouldn't be able to set bail and you should just be able to have people walking around.
Yeah, who could have guessed that racism existed in the party that founded the KKK, The party that supported, eugenics at Planned Parenthood, which was designed to basically stop the black population from growing. And guess what? They succeeded too.
They did. Yes, absolutely they did. The
successful to this
majority,
day.
the vast majority of babies aborted are black. That was the whole reason
by
Planned
design, Margaret
Parenthood.
Sanger, yeah.
Yep, exactly. That's what she wanted, to get rid of black people. And what you say is right. But it's also so predictable. The group that used race then to consolidate power now uses race to what? Consolidate power.
No, it's the same.
It's neo-racism now.
Yeah.
And it's not even. There's another piece to it. I don't know if you would call it quasi neo-racism or what. It's what George W. Bush called the subtle racism of low expectations.
Yeah.
So this idea among the left that blacks simply can't do it. They're incapable of functioning in society without the help of the government, which should be such an unbelievably demeaning idea.
Yeah.
But even civil rights leaders have bought that hook, line, and sinker.
I mean, a clear example is the voter ID thing. A black person can't go get an ID. I mean, that's the implication that today's activists are making.
They infantilize, minorities. They pretend like, oh, you can't really do anything for yourself. So let us white people take care of you. We can take care of you. So it's the same, I think a lot of people get confused and they say, okay, well, they were racist back then and they're not racist now. No, that's not quite.
No.
That's not quite what it is. It's back then they used race, like you said, Josh, they used race as a means for attaining power. They still do that. They will always do that. It's always about power and it's always about manipulation to gain power. That's what the Democratic Party is. That's what leftists are.